Dr. Riane Eisler as a special guest of the Feministic Book Weeks, and I would like to give a short overview of your great work. So you are a culture historian and evolutionary theorist, a social scientist, a lawyer, and author. Your research, writings, and lectures have greatly influenced numerous fields in the humanities, social sciences, and cultural studies. You also founded the Center of Partnership Studies and the Center for Partnership Systems, and initiated the Caring Economy campaign to demonstrate the economic value of caring for nature and for people. You received many awards, including the Feminist Pioneer Award, and your first work, also translated in German, Kelch und Schwert, was published in 1987, sold over 500,000 times, and is available in 26 languages. And your model of a caring economy was first published in 2007 in the United States, and in your bestseller book, The Real Wealth of Nations. Into German, it was translated by the translator, editor, and author Ulrike Brandhorst, and was published by the Bücher Verlag in 2020, called Die verkannten Grundlagen der Ökonomie, Wege zu einer Caring Economy. That's the book we will talk about. Maybe some words about the history of this book, because the Real Wealth of Nation proposes a dramatic new economic model that could help resolve many of the most critical problems we face today, and offers concrete steps for putting this model into practice. And Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations, first published in 1776, provided the first most influential explanation of the workings of modern economics, but with his focus on the market as the best mechanism for producing and sharing the essentials of life, Smith's Konzeptes only told part of the story, and leading to dysfunctional economic models that devalue activities that fall outside of the market's parameters of buying and selling. So the real wealth of nation, die verkannten Grundlagen der Ökonomie, you argue is not only financial, but includes the contributions of people and our natural environment. So you, Riane, go beyond the market to re-examine economics for a larger perspective and show that we must give visibility and value to the socially and economically essential work of caring for people and the planet if we are to meet the enormous challenge we're facing. So my name is Elisabeth Sechser, calling from Austria, Vienna to California, Carmel, and I'm honored to present your work in the German-speaking world and to link it also with my work in organizational democracy. And I think it's also important to tell that you grew up here in Vienna in 1931, and you had to escape from the Nazi regime with your parents as a child, and all your relatives were murdered in the Holocaust, and this shaping experience were determining factors for your work. So pleased to join you, Riane Eisler, and your great work and in supporting the Feministic Book Weeks. Very welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Elisabeth, and thank you for all of you for doing this Feminist Book Week, because I think that I am a feminist, of course, although I don't, my partnership model includes both halves of humanity, but it's really, and the caring economics, I should add, is essential for women.
Yes.
But it's also essential for men and for a better quality of life and for economic success for everyone.
Yes, yes. So can you briefly describe your motivation and the path that led to this book, The Real Wealth of Nation?
Well, I had, as you mentioned, in Gilt, I had introduced what I call the partnership domination social scale. And in this other book that you mentioned, The Real Wealth of Nations, die verkannten Grundlagen der Ökonomie, I applied this to looking at economics. Now, if you step back for a minute and look at the operating models that we're using today for economics, socialism, capitalism, they came out of very early industrial times. The 1700s for capitalism, the 1800s for socialism, and we're now in the 21st century post-industrial era. So on that count alone, they would be outdated. But it's much more than that, because these models came out of what I have identified as much more domination-oriented times. And both Smith and Marx really, well, there is nothing in either theory about caring for nature. Nature is there to be exploited, period. Secondly, and this is vital for feminists and for all of us, as far as they were concerned, the work of caring for people, children, the elderly, the sick, and yes, keeping a clean and healthy home environment, which of course translates also into keeping a clean and healthy planetary environment. That was just women's work to be done for free by a woman in a male-controlled household. So for them, that was just reproductive rather than productive work. And that is still perpetuated in our economics schools today, although it's beginning to change a little. And that is also perpetuated by measures such as GDP and GNP. So this book was motivated by really the urgent need for an economics that does include and no longer excludes the three life-sustaining sectors: the natural economy, the volunteer community economy, and of course, the household economy. And it proposes, as you said, a new economics. It proposes a caring revolution, really, a nonviolent revolution that, lo and behold, really includes the totality of our economy and recognizes and rewards the enormous economic value provided by caring for people starting at birth and caring for our natural life support systems. And yes, caring for people is still primarily done by women for either no reward at all or very low wages in the market. And of course, it's directly related to the lack of caring for our natural life support systems.
So it's an holistic economic theory. So it's bringing all parts together, that we really have a healthy economic for the world.
Well, it's essential because we have a very unhealthy economic system. And this exclusion, really, of the three life-sustaining sectors of the natural economy, volunteer community economy, and the household economy is simply completely dysfunctional.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we have to, it was always dysfunctional. But today, in our post-industrial era, when even economists who live in some alternate reality tell us that the most important capital is what they like to call human, high-quality human capital. I don't like that term, but we're talking about resilient, creative people who can work in teams instead of just taking or giving orders. We know from neuroscience that whether or not we have this, which is essential for the post-industrial era, yes, it highly hinges on the quality of care and education children receive in the first 5 years. And that has to be recognized. Yes. And is recognized, of course, in this new economics. And I think we can all play a very active role in convincing our decision makers, the people who control the resources in business, in government, to do so. And there are many trends in that direction. Paid parental leave in Germany, Austria, for example. But we still have a long, long way to go. And it really starts with a different economic model that, as you say, Elisabeth, is whole systems, is inclusive, is holistic.
It's holistic, yes. So, and caring as a human main capacity means that a caring economy is a more human economy and therefore a more powerful, resilient, better one. So it's an alternative that really helps the whole nation to have a more powerful economy. So sometimes I'm asking myself, but why don't we go on faster? But I think there are some reasons. And we need to, like you say, every person can do something.
Absolutely, but the first step is changing our own awareness.
Yes.
And realizing that we have been really using economic operating systems that are completely dysfunctional.
Yeah. So in your research, you found that the status of women is a better predicator of quality of life in a nation than GPD. It's called Bruttoinlandsprodukt in German. So should this be a major national goal? And what are some other key leverage points we should focus on?
Well, let me say that our study, which is available at our website, centerforpartnership.org, and is called Women, Men, and the Global Quality of Life, that study showing that the status of women is a powerful predictor of everyone's quality of life, women, men, everybody in between, children. That has been verified now, but it hasn't been given the attention it needs because people are used to their comfort zones, which are very siloed, very fragmented. But for one thing, the World Economic Forum's global gender gap reports combined with the World Economic Forum's global competitiveness reports show that the nations with the lowest gender gaps, which are Northern European nations like Finland, like Norway, like Sweden, like Denmark, have invariably been also in the highest ranks of global competitiveness reports. And, we're told, well, it's because these nations are small. Well, there are a lot of small, relatively homogeneous nations that orient much more to a domination economics, because what we're talking about with neoliberalism is really nothing new, trickle-down economics, which is an obscenity, really.
And it's nothing to do with the how large a country is or how small. It has nothing to do with that. It's the pattern, the doministic pattern that.
And also, they're not socialists. They often call themselves, well, they have a very, very healthy market economy. And precisely because they have caring policies and not coincidental. One of the key components of a partnership rather than a domination system, and that is also of a caring economics, is a higher status of women.
Mm-hmm. So this brings us to the question, to another question. This year, the Equal Pay Day in German will take place on the March 7th. So it shows the pay gap between men and women, counted in days. That women and men are paid unequally, and currently the average income difference in Germany is 18%, in Austria about 13%. In other words, women work unpaid for about every 8th year compared to men. And in both countries, the gap is shrinking, but it's still enormous. And so we're only talking about gainful employment here. However, we know, especially through your work, that about 50% of work that must be done in a society in order for the national economy to function at all is unpaid, is mainly done by women, and does not appear in the GPD, in Bruttoinlandsprodukt. What is what is your expertise for an equal payment and honor of the care work that contributes to a healthy, strong, successful economy and society? So,
well, look, I think that the first step really is what we're working on at the Center for Partnership Systems, which are new economic metrics that, in contrast to certainly GDP and GNP, which are really ridiculous. They call externalities everything that matters to us as people and to our planet, but also that show the economic value of the work of caring for people starting at birth and caring for our natural life support systems. And we call these social wealth economic indicators. We launched the first iteration in 2014, and we're now seeking funding to really, there are 52 indicators in this first iteration, and we want to condense it into an index. So we are looking for funding for that, and we're looking also for people to really support this effort, because it's not only in contrast to GDP and GNP, it's in contrast to most of the so-called alternative indicators, which don't focus on the whole system. They don't show what kinds of investments make for both economic success in our post-industrial era and a better quality of life for all. They just take a snapshot of what is, rather than showing that if you invest more in family support, if you have gender equity, if you recognize that we have been operating with what my research shows is a gendered system of values in which anything coded feminine is valued, then you get what you've got. But it can be changed. And as you know, Elisabeth, my work started in Schwerpunkt with showing that for millennia, really, and also this is one of the themes in my newest book, Nurturing Our Humanity, published by Oxford University Press in 2019, for millennia, human cultures oriented more to the partnership rather than the domination side of the partnership domination scale. We can do this, but we have to show, number one, it's possible, and number two, that it's effective. And number three, we have to all be very active to show the benefits to everyone.
Yes.
Women, yes, but also men and everyone in between.
Yes.
And to the economy and, of course, to children.
Well, once you said it's economic suicide not to invest in human capacity and education, and even the mainstream repeats how important it is. So why doesn't the shift succeed faster? Because it would be a benefit for all of us. So,
well, this really takes us to the questions that I very much are central to nurturing our humanity.
Your newest book.
The new book. And I so want this book to also be available in German for German-speaking nations, and really because it is a very important book. I had been working on it for 7 years. It takes me a long time to do my books, to do the research for them, when I invited the anthropologist Douglas Fry to join me as co-author. And I invited him, among other reasons, because he is probably the leading world authority on foraging societies, which is how we lived for millennia of our history. And he calls them the, quote, original partnership societies. They are more egalitarian in general. They are more gender balanced, which is central to this model. And yes, they are far, far more peaceful and less violent. In fact, we know today that warfare is at most, we know this from archaeological findings, is at most 5,000 to 10,000 years old. And that is exactly when we begin to see the shift from a partnership orientation to what we're trying to leave behind. But it's not easy to get people to leave our comfort zones. And the first thing that we have to do is to really have a holistic, inclusive model of society. And that is what the partnership domination social scale is about. That is what the caring economics of partnerism are all.
Is it our way of thinking, or is it like a comfort zone means that we don't want to change? But I think it's not. I think we're human. We are used to change, and we want a better life for others and for us. So,
and yet, if you look at the polarization in the world today, the struggle is not between right and left. I mean, or religious and secular, or capitalist and socialist. It's between those pushing us back to more rigid domination times, to more rigid domination in both the family and the state or tribe. Whether it's Putin in Russia, whether it's the Taliban, whether it's Bolsonaro, it doesn't really matter. They're completely different in many ways, different locations, different ideologies, but they have the same priorities. And guess what? One of their top priorities is invariably pushing us back to a normative ideal of a domination family, a highly punitive, violent, rigidly male-dominated, authoritarian family, Putin in 2018 radically reduced the penalty for family violence. So if someone hurts or kills a child or a woman or a man in a family, the penalty is much less than if they hurt or kill a stranger. Now, why? Because Putin and his ilk get it, the connection between that kind of family and that kind of a state. But the problem is much more because how we think and how we feel, and yes, how we act, including how we vote, actually has a lot, neuroscience tells us, to do with what children first observe and experience in their families. So we have to pay attention to 4 cornerstones: childhood, gender, economics, but yes, a different economics, and story and language. If you look at modern history, you see that actually we don't have to start with square one. If you look at the last 300-400 years through the partnership domination lens, you see that every progressive movement has actually challenged the same thing, a tradition of domination. You know, whether it was the so-called Enlightenment, rights of man movements challenging the divinely ordained right of kings to rule their quote subjects, or the feminist movement challenging the so-called divinely ordained right of men to rule over women and children in the quote castles, you know, a military image of their homes, or the abolitionist civil rights, Black Lives Matter movements, etc., challenging again another so-called divinely ordained right of a quote superior race to rule over inferior quote ones, or all the way to the environmental movement challenging our once hallowed conquest and domination of nature, which at our level of technological development could really spell the end of our species. But if you look at them very closely, they haven't had a holistic model. So most of their energy has gone into really dismantling the top of the domination pyramid. Politics and economics is conventionally defined, and that has left those 4 cornerstones of family, gender, including what I call the gender system of values that devalues everything coded feminine. So there's always money for prisons, you know, the male stereo, you know, the dominator archetype of the male head of household, the punitive male head of household, wait till your father gets home. You know, we have to connect the dots. And economics, I mean, the point of my book, I mean, many points, but one of them is that economics don't just spring up in a vacuum. They're embedded like other social institutions, like families, education, religion, politics, in a social cultural system. And they're very different depending on the degree of orientation to either the partnership or domination side, whether it's Nazi Germany or Khomeini's Iran or the Taliban or the so-called rightist fundamentalist alliance. Doesn't matter.
It's the same.
The conventional categories fragment
system.
our consciousness.
So it's that how important the household is, kind of the heart of economic productivity, or where it starts, and that actions against domestic violence and actions for early childhood education and action for the status of women have direct impact on an economic success of a society. So, and to understand how all of this is connected, and that we need to connect this.
Absolutely. And we cannot connect things that our conventional studies and our conventional categories make invisible. You know, the historian of science, David Noble, wrote a wonderful book, which I really like to cite. It's called A World Without Women, and it shows that Western science developed in a celibate, all-male, misogynist, monastic context. So yes, it was a world without women, but it was also a world without children.
Yes.
It was so we have to change the fragmentation of our academy. The fragmentation, help people. Pattern recognition is one of the most important skills that we have to teach young people. And we absolutely need a campaign to stop traditions of domination and violence against children and women in families.
Yes.
And I've written a lot about that in the human rights arena. I was a pioneer, as you know, in that area, to include under the purview of human rights, the human rights of women and children, the majority of humanity, which, if you think about it, are marginalized in conventional studies of society and marginalized in right-left, religious, secular, Eastern, Western, Northern, Southern, in our conventional categories. And we can no longer afford to do this.
Yes. And we can change it. So I think that's also important. Like you say, I mean, it depends on us to change day by day. Everybody. and
we need new words like hierarchies of actualization rather than hierarchies of domination. Partnership does not have to be a completely flat organization.
No, that's not the point.
But you know, the chalice and the blade are two symbols of power, aren't they? Kelch and Schwert.
Yes, Kelch and Schwert, yeah.
Schwert, you know, the sword is a blade, is the power to dominate, to control, to destroy, to take life. But there's also the power of the chalice to give life, to nurture life, to really illuminate life. And we have traditions of going way back into our prehistory of people believing in the power of the chalice rather than the blade.
Yes, yes.
But it's going to take a lot of work. It's not going to be easy. And we have to think of long-term work rather than short-term work. And we have to convince policymakers.
Yeah, and to use all your findings and all your research work to use it and to work with that. I think
absolutely
it's done for us.
It's all there.
Yeah, it's all there.
To be used.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, since we're talking to feminists or to people who are interested in feminism, the feminist revolution is a very, very important part of the movement towards partnership. It is crucial. However, there are many feminisms, and the feminism that only wants to have a bigger slice of the existing pie doesn't work. We have to use a woman's metaphor, bake a better pie. A partnership rather than a domination.
Yes, that's the point. I would like to come back. You already talked about your newest book, Nurturing Our Humanity, and it's we really hope that it will be translated soon into German. It was written by you and Douglas Frey, and so. Your theories are not utopias, they respond to human nature. And can your latest work, Nurturing Our Humanity, be seen as a continuation to Real Wealth of Nations? And can you tell us one or two important essences from this book, like make it appetizing for us?
Well, I think it is definitely a continuation, and it draws very heavily from biological science. and introduces what we call the partnership domination biocultural lens. Because this whole debate about nature versus nurture, it's another red herring. It's another distraction. The reality is that what counts, and neuroscience shows this, is gene expression. And what genetic potentials we do or do not express, again, highly, highly depends on what children first experience and observe. And that happens largely in families as influence, because again, families like economics don't spring up in a vacuum of the culture or subculture in which these families are situated. Now, one of the things that Nurturing Our Humanity, this new book published by Oxford University Press in 2019 shows, is that we have been told a false story about human nature. This, whether it's original sin or selfish genes, I mean, they fight each other, but it's really the same story. We're bad. That's human nature. We have to be rigidly controlled from the top, right? That is a false story. The reality is that given the opportunity, and that depends very much on the culture, subculture is mediated by family, education, religion, etc., economics, etc. We know that these so-called pleasure centers of our brains light up more when we share and care than when we win or dominate. But if our early experiences, and not everybody, thank goodness, is shaped by these, but a majority of people are, to really, they go into denial of the reality, the denial of who's causing them pain, which are, of course, their caregivers, because they've been taught to do that, because they experience that. We have to break that cycle. We must. And it can be done. Even the American Psychological Association a few years ago finally made a statement saying that spanking, which unfortunately is still held to be okay. I mean, violence against a small dependent child, dependent on life, right? On its caregivers, that's okay. That no, that spanking is, number one, ineffective as a means of discipline, and number two, it is harmful. It is harmful physically and psychologically. And this book shows, for example, that people who voted for Trump, in terms of their child rearing, is very interesting. They were much more interested in conformity than in curiosity. And denial is one of the leading characteristics of people, especially in our time of rapid technological, social, economic change. Denial, climate change denial, election result denial, COVID-19 denial. It is really, but the good news is that these people too, who are today being encouraged by, leaders like Bolsonaro, like Trump, like Orban, etc., they follow authority. So if we can get enough people in religion, and I'm working on a project like that. I have an article in Cosmos magazine, KOSMOS, on sorting the grain from the chaff in our religious scriptures. I mean, that is essential. But we need people to speak up, to say, no, this is immoral. This is moralism. This is moral insensitivity rather than moral sensitivity. And yes, you have compartmentalized morality, moralism in domination systems. That's essential. The in-group versus the out-group, starting with the in-group of mankind and the female other. So this book really, in a way, is a summary, and it ends with 4 cornerstones, with practical interventions that we can all work on.
That's great.
To really rebuild, to shift these 4 cornerstones: childhood, gender, economics, story and language, from domination to partnership. That is essential.
Yeah, so this is the newest book in English, so we hope soon also we can read it in German. And this is the book translated from the Büchner Verlag, die verkannten Grundlagen der Ökonomie, translated by Ulrike Brantor. And so many thanks for your time, for this talk, for this conversation. And I would like to refer again to the book and books, and also to all your great work, and hope very much that we will all benefit and participate from this important finding. Thank you so much, Riane Eisler.
Thank you so much, Elisabeth, for doing this, and thank you all, because you are the change. You can do it, but you need this holistic frame to do it.
Thank you, and have a great day.